Well, hello young people and those who are young at heart. We are here today for another cuppa with, and today our very special guest is Derek Watt, and Derek is here representing Prison Fellowship. So Derek, thank you very much for coming out to be with us and joining us for a cuppa, even though he's not got a cuppa. Derek has been working with Prison Fellowship for quite some time. So for those who perhaps don't know, Derek, what is Prison Fellowship and what kind of work does Prison Fellowship do?
I think the first thing I maybe need to say to you is we're known as Prison Fellowship Scotland.
Okay.
Now we're known as Prison Fellowship Scotland because there are around 130 prison fellowships around the world. Almost in fact in every continent there's a prison fellowship. Canada, America, France, whatever. So we're known as Prison Fellowship Scotland.
Okay.
There is also a Prison Fellowship England and Wales, Prison Fellowship Northern Ireland. So it distinguishes us from the other prison fellowship groups around the world.
I did not know that. I'm learning already.
Right. And the short term is we're known as PFS, which stands for Prison Fellowship Scotland. Okay, and as Freddie kind of mentioned, we are an international organisation, and primarily in Scotland, more than in some of the other countries, primarily we are in prison. All the work that we do is mostly inside the prison. So Prison Fellowship Scotland, or Prison Fellowship, kind of describes what we do. We create fellowships within prisons.
Okay.
Now, I don't know if that's helpful, Jen, is that?
That is.
Answer
So,
your question?
yes, when you're creating those kind of fellowship, what does that look like for, what does that look like in the prison? So how is that fellowship created? Do you have a group? Do you have one-to-ones? Do you have Bible studies? What kind of thing do you do?
Okay. I could answer that question by saying yes. Okay, because we do all of these things.
Yeah.
We actually come in under the authority of the chaplains. Alright? They technically invite us in to be part of chaplaincy.
Okay.
Alright? And what we are really invited to do by the chaplains is to do the non-institutional work, the non-government type work that would happen within a prison.
Yeah.
And so we do what we call conversational groups. So we will invite, our prisoners will be invited to come and attend our groups. Now, where we are at just now, this would be about the size of what we call the Multi-Faith Centre in Gateside Prison in Greenock.
Okay.
Where one of the groups that I do happens. And we would be as informal as you and I are just now. The girls or the men, they don't come in separate groups, would be sitting round this group as we are this morning, and we would be chatting to one another, having a cuppa.
A cuppa.
Okay, so there would be tea and coffee and biscuits, and it would be very, very interactive. Okay, so we would sing, we would chat together. Our program could be very, very varied, from a question and answer session to somebody giving a testimony, to somebody giving a short Bible talk, to question and answers. So what we do is very, very varied.
Yeah.
And it's always organised, but sometimes it will look as if it's thoroughly disorganised.
I know all about that.
You do. But that's how we operate within the prison.
Yeah.
It's very, very informal, but always focused, but very informal.
Thank you. And so, can you tell me maybe what the heart behind Prison Fellowship Scotland is? What's the motivation? Why do you do that kind of work?
Let me answer that question, Jen, by saying how prison fellowship began in America, for example, because that's where it started.
Okay.
It started in America, and it started as a result of Charles Colson, or Chuck Colson,
Okay.
who was a high-ranking member of Parliament over in America. And he got the jail.
Right.
And he'd become a Christian shortly before going into prison. And while he was in prison, he got involved in Bible studies with other prisoners who were Christians. When he left prison, he promised the prisoners that he would do something for them. He wouldn't forget them. And he organized, because of his ranking, he organized to get prisoners out of prison, to train them as evangelists, to go back into prison. However, that didn't last too long, and so what happened was he organised volunteers to go into prison. And Prison Fellowship Scotland copied that. All our work is done inside prison, apart from maybe visiting the occasional prisoner outside and that kind of stuff. But that's the heartbeat of it. It is to create fellowships and encourage prisoner to evangelise prisoner. Okay, so that's really behind it for us. We go in, if you like, as the pioneers, and then we, as prisoners become Christians, they more and more take over the responsibility for the groups. So that's really the heartbeat, if you like, of it. We're encouraging prisoners to evangelise prisoners.
Do you know what was so interesting? I had no idea that Prison Fellowship began in America.
Yeah.
And it's amazing. It's just another person's experience, and then that has had an impact around the world. That's incredible. Derek, you've been involved in Prison Fellowship for quite some time. You can share, if you like, how long, it's up to you. But Derek, for you personally, what's your motivation for being a part of Prison Fellowship Scotland? Why do you do it?
Now, when I was 23 years old, which is just a couple of years ago, Jen, all right, I'm now 77. So it was that length of time, that's going way back to when I was 23 years old. I come from Aberdeen, and I'm walking home in Aberdeen with a friend who says to me, Derek, I believe God wants you to work in the prison service. Now, I don't know how that appeals to you. I'm sure you will be quite comfortable with that expression. And so I put that to the test, and I applied for a job in the Scottish Prison Service, and eventually was accepted in the prison service. And I started in the prison service in 1966. Okay? I retired from the prison service in 1998, and I've continued as a volunteer with Prison Fellowship Scotland since then. So I've been in the prison service now for about 50 years. Okay? Been involved with Prison Fellowship Scotland. In fact, I was a founder member of Prison Fellowship Scotland just slightly less than 40 years ago, when we organised ourselves and became known as Prison Fellowship Scotland. Now that's my background, that's my history, and my heart, I would like to say my motivation is a love for God. I would say that would have to be number one. And also over the years, a very real love for prisoners in prison and seeing the value of the gospel to prisoners in prison and obviously when they leave prison. So if that answers your question, that's my answer, Jen.
Thank you very much for sharing that with us. I suppose something else that I'm interested to know is whether you could perhaps share a kind of memorable moment or a highlight experience over your time with Prison Fellowship of the positive impact that Prison Fellowship has had on some of the people who've interacted with you.
Okay. I'm now talking to you, Jen, with my prison service hat on, all right, rather than my prison fellowship hat. need to know is Prison Fellowship Scotland has provided a forum in all the prisons in Scotland. Now we're speaking here this morning about Greenock. It provides a forum for prisoners to get away from prison for maybe an hour and a half. It's like going into a different environment for them. So it allows anything up to 12.5 prisoners to come into a room with no prison staff, a group of volunteers from the community, and to kind of relax away from what they see as prison. So it creates a forum for them to be in prison but out of prison. And from the prison staff's point of view, it's an opportunity to have a different kind of routine. They can benefit from the prisoners benefiting from what goes on in the group. In other words, the common thing will be to say to us when the prisoners go back, they always come back happy. So what they do is they get a group of happy prisoners coming back into the hall, which clearly makes their life a whole lot different. Now that's in the prison environment, and that's with my jailer hat on.
Yeah.
It's a good thing for the jail, whether they agree with what we're doing or not. It's a benefit to them. And socially, it's a benefit to the prisoners.
Yes.
Okay. Highlights. I won't mention all of the names, but I can mention a number of names, and you'll find them in the pulpits in Scotland today. Preaching the gospel, responsible for congregations. So there's a number of men, high-profile men, who today are ministers of the gospel.
Wow.
Having spent many years in prison. Okay? But the encouragement that we mostly get is really the day-to-day work. A Christian in prison. I could tell you her story, it would take maybe a wee bit too long. But Laura has proved to be an absolute out-and-out evangelist. And I would call her our recruiting sergeant in the prison. And most of the girls who come along to our group, have really come at the invitation of Laura. She's had an amazing influence within the prison, dealing in prison. Quite amazing. She's lovely, and she's a bright witness for the Lord Jesus. So that's Laura. On the men's side, we've got another group of men. Again, one of them is a life sentence prisoner, Paul, and he is an encouragement because he brings men from his unit to come along to Bible studies that are arranged for the males. All right? So that's a little kind of example of prisoner evangelizing prisoner. But I could tell you, we could spend the rest of the morning telling jail stories. But there's lots to encourage you, and there's certainly lots to encourage me, of the work that goes on in the Scottish prisons, of men and women whose lives have been radically changed by hearing about Jesus and accepting him into their lives. Quite amazing, Jen. I could write a book. If I could write books, I would write a book about what's happened in Scottish prisons.
Gives me chills just listening,
Right.
you know, just hearing about these transformation stories. And maybe you should write that book. I'm sure there's somebody out there who can help do that. So my final question for you, Derek, is if someone wanted to support the work of Prison Fellowship in Scotland, how would they go about that? I know that you've mentioned that you rely upon volunteers. So if someone wanted to support the work, how would they do that?
Right, the easiest way to do it would be to go on to Prison Fellowship's website.
Okay.
But here's what you need to know. Go into Prison Fellowship Scotland's website. If you just put in Prison Fellowship, you'll get the American Prison Fellowship or England and Wales. So go to Prison Fellowship Fellowship Scotland, and there you'll get all the information really that will help you to either become a volunteer or will help you to know how you can maybe financially support Prison Fellowship. We only employ 2 individuals, right? That's our employees.
Yeah.
It's run by a board of trustees, much like IYFC. So we have a board of trustees, we have 2 employees, and around 100 volunteers that will meet the needs of Prison Fellowship in the various prisons in Scotland. Okay? So if you contact Prison Fellowship Scotland on their website, then you'll be able to get all the information you need to come and join us or support us.
Derek, that's brilliant. Thank you so much for coming and having a cuppa with me. I've thoroughly enjoyed learning more about Prison Fellowship Scotland today, and just hearing from your experiences. So thank you very much for coming and sharing with us.
Jen, I want to thank you, and thank you for the work you do in Inverclyde. Brilliant work.
Thanks, Derek.
Thanks a lot, Jen. Thank you. And to you folks who are listening, God bless you.